Joining us today on the Conscious Entrepreneur podcast is Guy Rubin, the founder and CEO of Ebsta, a pioneering company in the CRM and sales tech space. Now, I had the pleasure of meeting Guy at the SaaS Open event in Austin earlier this year, and I was absolutely blown away by his depth of knowledge and the innovation that he is bringing to sales and the insights he's got around B2B dynamics in particular. Since 2012, Guy has been steering Ebsta through a number of transformations and pivots, each time emerging stronger as a business and more attuned to the evolving needs of their customers. So today we'll explore not only his journey as an entrepreneur, but also the critical decisions that help shape Ebsta into the company that it is today, as well as Guy's non-obvious advice for aspiring entrepreneurs. So, from the importance of surrounding yourself with mentors to the nuances of building an effective sales motion in today's market, Guy's got a lot of wisdom to share. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Conscious Entrepreneur podcast. Guy Rubin, Ebsta founder and CEO, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. It's great to see you here.
Oh, thank you for having me, Alex.
Ebsta is a really cool company in the sales tech space. I met you in Austin at the SaaS Open event in March of this year. That's 2024. And I was just blown away with your insights and all the information that you shared about the state of sales, what's going on, what's happening in the B2B world, and the depth of your expertise there. And then I found out in preparing for today's podcast, you've been doing Ebsta since 2012. And I would love to start with an understanding of what drove you to become an entrepreneur. It's not an easy jump for most people. It's something that can take some time and consideration, and there's obviously lots of consequences to doing that. But tell us, if you don't mind rewinding the clock a little bit here, Guy, what was coming up for you during that time when you were thinking about starting a company? What were your insights that you wanted to bring to the market, and how did all this come about?
Well, I appreciate the question. I think the one thing I'd start with for your listeners and followers is be cautious about taking the leap, because it's very difficult to undo. I think there's a lot of people that perhaps leave university, don't really get very much experience in the business world, especially into post-COVID with people working from home and so on. And then they go off and jump in and set up their own business. And I think, they read about the one-off success stories of these people that have left university and 3 months later they're a gazillionaire and everything worked out perfectly, right? And of course there are exceptions where that happens. But I suppose my view would be to be very cautious about making that step, because once you've made the leap into being your own boss, it's very difficult to go backwards. And frankly, I think I'd be an awful employee if I ever did go back that route. And I genuinely believe that there's a lot of talented people that might come out of university and perhaps they could set up their own business and be okay. And maybe if they stuck around for 3 years and learned through, by being I very much believe your 20s are your apprenticeship years. And I think I know for myself, if I'd started a business when I was 20, I might have been fine. And, I'd learned my lessons as I go and I probably would have earned an income. But would have I achieved all of my goals? And I think arguably by doing your apprenticeship years and keeping that learning curve as steep as you can, especially in your 20s, I think it sets you up really well to then go into being an entrepreneur and setting up your own business perhaps in your 30s. And you know what? It's kind of okay to be broke in your 20s, as long as your learning curve is as steep as it possibly can be. And I think the only filter any of your followers should think about when they're working out what they should be doing next is, especially in your 20s, is what's going to give me the absolute steepest learning curve? Where can I go where I'm going to surround myself with individuals that are so much better than me, that have so much more experience than me? Where can I go where I'm going to be the most junior person in the room? And it's very tempting to go to a place where you're the oracle in the room. All right, if you're 21 and you surround yourself with a bunch of 16-year-olds, the chances are you're going to know a lot more than they are. But if you surround yourself with 40 and 50-year-olds that have gone through this journey and have a huge amount of experience and knowledge and expertise, and you can dive into that and you can learn from those individuals, that learning curve is so valuable. And I go even further and say, look, if you genuinely are going to go on this journey of running your own business, then if you are going to invest that time, that decade, into learning from others, it's not a part-time job, right? If you're working 9 till 6, get there at 8. Ask the product guys if you can sit with them for an hour before work starts. Ask the developers if you can spend some time with them afterwards. Buy them a beer and ask them a load of questions, because all of these individuals around you that can give you knowledge and experience have gone through all of this pain. And you should really only be thinking about taking that next leap into being your own boss, I believe, once that learning curve starts to slow down. And I would really encourage people to think about where are they going to get the most amount of learning, because the fact you might earn 5 or 10,000 more in a year, but your learning perhaps is quite flat, doesn't really serve you in the longer term. And ultimately, while you don't suddenly, well, at least from my experience, I actually earned quite well in my 20s as an employee, probably more than I did in my early 30s when I started working for myself. But even in your 30s, it's not the end of the world if you're not earning a lot of money. But my goodness, you do not want to be, a salary slave in your 40s and 50s, when you're not, when really you're only a month away from someone making a decision that you're not in control of. So it is a marathon. It isn't a sprint. And investing your time and energy, especially in those early years, in getting that learning curve as steep as you can, and really questioning whether now's the right time to make that next move is really, really important. Because once you've taken that leap, once you've gone through that door, you can't really go back. And then you're kind of, and I genuinely believe that if I'd started earlier, I might have been successful to a certain point. But the longer I invest in that learning curve, the higher the bar is that I can aim at.
And so how old were you when you started Ebsta or your other businesses? Like, how much experience had you gained yourself, and what were your kind of no going back decision points to say, okay, this is what I'm going to go do?
So I was 30 when I stepped out on my own, and I think there were a number of data points there for me. So first of all, I'd done very well in sales, so I was earning more and more every year, and suddenly I hit a point where I thought, well, realistically, am I going to continue on this curve? How am I going to continue to increase my ability to earn? And being an employee, that suddenly I become the most expensive person in the business, and that's a really kind of scary place to be. You're on that pedestal. So that was part of it, but also I found a passion for what I wanted to invest my time in, and I remember one of my best friends had an exit a year earlier, or a year or two earlier, and every time I saw him, I would talk to him about 3 or 4 different ideas that I had. And then one time I came to see him and I only had one idea, and I was really focused on it. And he said, "Right, now's the time. This is it. This is the one." And then and also it's a combination of things. Is the market right for what you do? Have you built your network up? Have you finished? Have you graduated from your apprenticeship years? Have you got your network? Do you understand a specific market or an ecosystem? Are you passionate about? Do you know more about something than others do? Because it's always, grass is always greener, right? We can always look at this other market that would be really, if only I was over there. But the chances are there's someone else who knows much more about that space than you do. So do what you know. Surround yourself with people that bring you complementary skills. So when we started the business, there was a number of us that came together, and it was all of us were very different in what we did, but we all had a lot of respect for what each other had brought to the table and what we'd done in the past. So again, I don't think you are running your own business if you're on your own. I think you need at least a business partner, or a group of individuals that can really help you because suddenly you become a lot more than the sum of the parts. And that's quite difficult if there's only one of you.
Absolutely. Walk us through, if you would, what it was like to set up Ebsta at the beginning. What did you stick with the same hypothesis? Are you currently still working with the same ideas and hypotheses that you had when you started? What wound up being correct? What wound up being wrong? And what did that look like?
So, in short, we've had more pivots than hot dinners. We've definitely gone through that journey. And I look back at when we started, and almost with envious eyes, because you're in this beautiful position where you're enthusiastic, you're intelligent, you're unencumbered. you don't have this historical business that you have to kind of drag along with you, or these kind of this historical debt that you kind of bring along when you're in business, when you're already working. And so you can make those decisions. And I think in hindsight, if I could have done anything differently, I would have spent another 3 months doing the thinking, doing the planning. Because my goodness, jumping straight in is great and it's very enthusiastic, but then all of a sudden reality kicks in. And kind of one of the biggest challenges is you get an early adopter or a big client, and all of a sudden that's not quite what you wanted to do, but it's something slightly off. But you have to service it because that's where the revenue is. And now all of a sudden you've now got this thing that you're still having to support and service, and you didn't have the necessary discipline to you've now got a cost base you need to service, and you need to keep going on that route. So I'm very envious of those that are kind of at that beginning step, and my advice to them would be, do the thinking. You're free at the moment. Before you shackle yourself with expenses and customers and so on, you're in a beautiful free moment, and that moment lasts a very, very short amount of time. And how many times have we met people that perhaps it was, for whatever reason, maybe without their control, they've had to leave an employer their job, and they're very concerned about it. What am I going to do? How's it going to go? And and outsiders, what we say to them is, in 6 months you'll look back and it'll be the best thing that ever happened to you, right? And of course, at the time, you're very concerned and worried about these things, but in reality, 6 months later, you look back and go, my goodness, if only I knew then that it was all going to be fine, I could have enjoyed it a whole lot more. And I would encourage people to think about that, to say it will all be fine, and take your time, do the thinking, do the planning. We call it the French way, right? Which is to do some thinking, sit around a table, open a bottle of wine, work out what you want to do, and then when you're finished, open up another bottle of wine and keep thinking, keep talking, do more planning, right?
That's the French way, huh?
That's the French way, yeah. Keep opening those bottles of wine and just do all the planning and thinking before you make that first step, because once you're in, suddenly it has momentum of its own.
Well, that advice, frankly, is really contrarian to what we hear a lot in the startups world, right? So in the startup world, it's do your minimum viable product, get out there, experiment, test your hypotheses, see what's happening. Don't overthink it. Let the market tell you what to do. So your approach of saying, go have lunch, have a bottle of wine, and do it again. Make sure you're testing, you're thinking all this stuff through, because you're also saying something that's fairly unusual, which is this is a hard decision to reverse. And again, in a lot of startup culture, like I went through Techstars back in the day, the Techstars Accelerator, and the whole idea there was, hey, just build things as quickly as you can. If it doesn't work, pivot, change to something else, and just constantly be out there changing things. And sort of the general philosophy behind this is, if nothing works out, at least someone in corporate America will employ you. But you're taking a very different approach here.
Look, I think both are true, right? I think once you've done all your thinking and you've got a really clearly defined plan, then great, absolutely jump in, get MVP out the door, and start running with it. But what I would say is that if 100 things have to be true for you to be successful, the mistake we all make is we get really enthusiastic because 95 of them are true. And so, well, yeah, but 95 of them really are true, and it's a really exciting, and suddenly, yeah, but the other five that need to be true, or even the other one that needs to be true, if it's not true, it doesn't work. And so it doesn't matter how much you want it to work. It doesn't matter how 95% of what you want needs to be true is true. Really doing that thinking and doing it in advance means that you can pivot and evolve the thinking before you start spending the money. And the reality of it'll be fine, if you go down a road and it doesn't work, you just go down a different road. Well, in reality, you're playing with people's lives, and you're getting people involved in the business. People are committing their time and resources to the project, and then suddenly they're not needed because you've decided to go in a different direction, and actually that process takes 3 months to get them to come to leave the business, and all of a sudden then the market's changed again, and now suddenly you don't have the credibility you had before, and the person that relied on you isn't there, and all of these things can affect you, right? So I would agree with you that the quickest mistakes that are the cheapest mistakes are the earliest ones you make. And trying to fail fast is definitely a thing. But before we even go down that journey, just being brutally honest and testing, thinking it through what we're trying to achieve, and have we really got all the components we need to make this true? It doesn't mean it can't happen, but it might mean that we might need to, change or our thinking, or get someone else involved to put the right team together so that we can, so that we can be successful.
That's a great discipline to have. And I was nodding a lot earlier when you were talking about, what happens if you're bringing on a customer that's maybe not dead on ICP, and you find yourself doing something just to get the revenue in the door, and then you've got this customer and expectations and all this sort of stuff. And I have 100% lived that in the B2B SaaS world. I know exactly what that feels like. I also know what it feels like to then say, oh, we're trying to get over here, but we're encumbered by all this existing commitments and stuff that we're doing, and it does make you a whole lot less nimble. But I would love to, if you can share some specific examples. You mentioned that you've been through a lot of pivots, so you've done this. You have lived experience of this stuff. When you were doing the pivots, what did you think was going to happen? What was reality? And then what did you do about it?
Okay, so when we first, my background, my previous business I was involved with was in recruitment technology. And so that was where I had a big network. And so when we wanted to do our own thing, the first thing we developed was a widget, a product, a tool for recruiters. And that kind of made sense because that's where our market is. That's what our relationships are. And then I got, I had a mentor, and one of the things I'd really encourage early entrepreneurs to think about is, again, surrounding yourself with those mentors. One of the things I do on a regular basis is ask people that had a lot more experience than me, would they be willing to be a guest chair at my board? And I don't think I ever got a no. Everyone quite liked the idea. Oh, I'm being asked to be a guest chairman. I said, well, I can't pay you any money, but I'll buy you lunch. And different people took it to different levels of seriousness. Some people would just turn up at the board meeting and just shout at you for half an hour. Others would spend a few days going through all the numbers and really trying to get under the skin of where they could feel they could add value. And people love being asked for your help. And so you'd be surprised how often people go, yeah, sure, I'll happily give you some of my time. And so again, it makes sense, right? I knew the recruitment tech space, I knew the customers, I knew the recruitment companies, and so we kind of built a little product for that space. Now, there were two problems in that market. The first is it's a tiny market. Now that's great because I knew every company, all right? I knew the top 150 recruitment companies out there and their C-levels. Well, that's good news, but the bad news is I can only sell to 150 companies. So that was a concern. And the other problem was that they hadn't really adopted the cloud. Everyone was using kind of server, they had kind of tin in their office with rubbish internet connection, right? So we found ourselves, I think 18 months later or 2 years later, we found ourselves in a place where we had 50 clients using 18 different systems. And out of those 18 systems, 17 of them were offline. And so we were suddenly really they were constantly having issues connecting, and we had to make a brave decision to say no. We're going to sunset 17 of these 18, and we ended up just servicing customers using a system called Bullhorn, which is a CRM for recruiters, but it's in the cloud. And then so that was the first pivot, and then very quickly I had a mentor. I was mentioning kind of surrounding yourself with people that you respect. So I've always had a kind of a group of mentors that I would lean into. And one of them pulled me aside and said, what the hell are you doing in this teeny market called recruitment? There's a whole world out there of salespeople outside of recruitment that you can go and sell to. Have a look at this ecosystem called Salesforce. And after ignoring him a number of times, we ended up having a look at the ecosystem, and we built a little widget for Salesforce customers. And at the time, it was email integration for Salesforce, and believe it or not, they didn't have an alternative email integration solution. And suddenly and it doesn't matter how many times this mentor of mine had told me how big the ecosystem was. As humans, we really struggle to understand scale. Okay. And so, the recruitment industry is big and the sales ecosystem is big. It's all big, right? So, but actually, suddenly, and bear in mind, I knew the recruitment space really quite well. I mean, I hosted the recruitment awards. I was kind of a face in that space. And then we entered the Salesforce ecosystem with this widget that integrated your emails with Salesforce. We were the number one app on the Salesforce App Exchange for 2.5 years.
That's big distribution. That's big. That's a big deal.
we had 50,000 companies kick off our free trial. So I've gone from knowing the market of recruitment, where there's 150 companies you can sell to, don't you know? Because I know them all, and suddenly you get visibility of 50,000 different businesses, hundreds of thousands of users. We had something like 25% of the ecosystem were using our products. And it was, and with this tiny little company in London, I remember sending Benioff an email. Hello, Mr. Benioff. We've been on top of your app exchange for the last year, but we haven't got any money. Can would you be open for having a meeting with us, kind of thing? And we got a very nice response and got invited to their offices, and it was great. But be careful where you go, right? Suddenly
did you raise money from Salesforce?
We've never raised money. I mean, we've taken on some angel money in the early days, but apart from that, I thought I knew more. I thought I knew better than everybody else. You talk to everyone, they go, "Well, what stage are you at?" Expecting them to talk about, funding rounds. Okay, I was like, "Well, I don't need funding. Well, if you're good enough, you sell your way through, right? That's how that's how it works." And of course, another lesson learned, right? So we never actually did any kind of formal fundraising, and bluntly, Salesforce came out with their own email integration for Salesforce, so that was a real challenge. Okay, and we needed to make some big decisions about what direction we wanted to go in. So having visibility of that many businesses' data, so I'm a bit of a data geek. So my kind of passions are data and sales. So for anybody selling anything out there, if you get my telephone number, give me a call, because I never turn down a sales call, and I'm always I'm a student of the art of sales. So I'm always keen to see how different people are dealing with things, and it's not unusual that I'll end up coaching a sales rep that gives me a call, because I always love I love the tenacity of salespeople to go out and pick up the phone. I never really understood the idea of sales recruitment companies, because if you're a salesman and you want to work for me, pick up the damn phone and run it like another sales process, right? But anyway, so we had to pivot the business, and we were very passionate about looking at the data. And suddenly, email integration had moved on from email integration to email and calendar integration, and then ultimately extracting contacts. So finding all of the relationships a business had, but in their mailboxes, and that kind of took us on this journey of revenue intelligence, trying to understand the relationships that drive revenue for organizations. And that's kind of the pivot that led to kind of what we've become now.
And when was that? When was that last piece of going from we're not doing email integrations, we need to do something much bigger, we need to provide all this intelligence data behind that?
The pivot probably started in 2018, and we probably landed on what we were going to become in 21, and it probably took another 3 years to get there. Okay. So the now where we sit, if you ask me what we do now, the biggest challenge we see in the market is that all these businesses have spent all of this money on all of this tech. Now, I'm not going to name them all, right? But we all know the tech stacks that we have in our sales and marketing teams. And with all of that money being spent, 4 out of 5 reps are still missing quota. So there's something fundamentally wrong here. And so we've taken a very different approach to the challenge. And in summary, we know that the short answer to fixing that problem is trying to truly understand what the top performers are doing differently to your B and C players. And once you understand what that looks like and turn it into kind of pictures, like really easy to grasp data points and insights, it's very, very easy to move the B and C players up. Because even though they may not be naturally gifted sales reps, they may not be your A-star players, they do still want to win. And when you show it to them in an easy to understand format as to how to win, or what the top performers are doing at every stage of the sales cycle, and prompting them to do the same, suddenly they just follow the playbooks because they want to win as well. They want to get the same commission checks as the big players. Yeah. And that's really the secret behind Ebsta. That's what we've effectively done. And the challenge our peers have, our competitors have, is that they deliver really nice dashboards, but they're all based on flawed data. And because of our background, we started from a position of, well, we need to fix the data first. And so we're the only player in the park that fixes all of the historical data for the last year or two and goes back through deals that closed, won, and lost in the past to truly understand what went on. And that's almost impossible for our competitors because they're relying on data reps are manually added to CRM, and ultimately we all know that if you add
Manual CRM entry for sales folks is usually kind of a challenge. Well, so this is really cool, and I want to get into and talk about the current value proposition a little bit more. But first, before we go there, I just want to close the loop on what I heard with these pivots. So pivot number one was, we think we're doing this thing in recruiting, so we think we have an offering there, and the realization was, hey, this market isn't big enough for us, or there isn't enough consistency for us to sell something at scale, for us to sell the same thing to the same person over and over, because like you said, lots of different systems, 17 other systems, all this stuff. So lots of need for doing things that don't scale, things that might be custom. And that can be a real drag on growth. If you're constantly, you're basically a consulting company at that point, if you're doing something custom for every single client. So then you had this advice, which was go take a look at the Salesforce ecosystem, which is bigger now than it was then, but even then it was big and growing very quickly. So your insight there was, what's missing? What are the workflows that are not existent within the Salesforce ecosystem? And it was email integration. So that allowed you to very quickly jump to the top of the list, or at least to provide a lot of value to a large number of companies. But then that market evaporated when Salesforce brought out their own tool, and you said, what can we do with everything that we've learned so far? And that's where this revenue intelligence and the kind of really going after the data to understand your top performers, that's where we landed on this current value proposition. Did I get that right?
Yeah, look, inevitably there's nuances there, right? So again, if you look back, we think the recruitment space wasn't big enough, and they weren't using the latest kind of cloud-based tech at the time, and bluntly, they don't spend the money. Recruiters are very short-term focused, right? They're focused on the next deal that they can do, and if you can't influence the next deal, then it's not a high enough priority for them. Frankly, recruiters get the technology they deserve, right? They're not putting big. There's a reason why the likes of Oracle don't invest in that space, because it's just not big enough. They don't have the budgets for it. So that was a challenge. We were doing what Outreach and SalesLoft are doing now, before Outreach and SalesLoft existed, and arguably what we should have done is stayed there, raised a lot of money, and become a SalesLoft or Outreach. And then if we wanted to do something separate around revenue intelligence, great, set up a separate business and do that separately. But we didn't. Again, another lesson we probably can learn after the event was that we decided to pivot the existing business over to something net new, because we were a small team and that was what we were passionate about. So, but it took a whole lot longer than we expected. It was a lot more painful than we expected. And trying to juggle supporting the existing customer base on the old product and using that revenue to fund the new product, and the new product inevitably taking a whole lot longer. Number one, because once you get into it, you find out there's a whole lot of gotchas that you need to kind of address. But also, you've got this distraction of supporting these old world customers. It was kind of devil or deep blue sea, right? We can either support the old customers and keep independent, own our own business, or we can, jettison that, do this new thing, and raise a shed load of money through a third party. But then we're not in control of our own destiny again. So. We rightly or wrongly, we picked our poison, but it took us probably 6 years since then to really kind of emerge as something net new, and now to be known as this net new thing rather than what we were known for before.
Well, that's really important, because I talked to so many startup people, and I want to share a story in a second, but I talked to so many people in the startup ecosystem who have no conception of the time that these things take. Right. And so for you to say, look, it's been 6 years since we did this last pivot. It takes time to get up and running. It takes time to start from scratch, even if you're pivoting and you already have revenue and customers and ideas and insights. And so it's great to hear what this actually looks like, because we all think, oh, yeah, I'm just going to do this, and by next quarter, we're going to have a humming business. In reality, the market will move at its own pace, and there's a lot of stuff that we need to do. But the story I wanted to share was just, there's so many parallels between what I'm hearing from you and our journey at Capta, my company. And we did something very, very similar back in the day. We started as an HR performance management application. So this was kind of like a better version of success factors, if you will. And because my background and my co-founder's background were all in HR. And so we said, we're going to go do this and so on. And, we built this thing and it was snazzy and neat and it worked. And to your point, HR is a very difficult customer. They don't have budget. They don't have authority. They tend to not be like super big risk takers and adopters of early technologies. And so we found ourselves with this great thing that just wasn't really getting adopted. And the insight for us came from when we saw 3 different customers all independently. So without us telling anybody, all independently started using the HR and performance tool, which was about, what are your goals? What are you doing to accomplish your goals? How does this stuff align with the big initiatives of the company and all that sort of jazz? And then review and so on. But what they were all doing is they were using this to track the commitments they were making to their customers. So they had big clients like, whatever. So our clients had big customers like Vodafone or Citibank or, whatever it was. And they would sit there and they would say, well, I have to do this for Vodafone. And I have a bi-weekly meeting with them when we review all this stuff. So this tool is helping me to look good in front of my client. And then the other customer was like self-organizing around the Walmart program or whatever it was that they were working on. And we're looking at this and we're like, they're using our internal HR tool to manage their customers. And I didn't even know that there was such a thing as customer success at this point. I didn't know that there was, I didn't know what was what. And so we did what you'd expect. We called them up and said, hey, what are you guys doing? And they said, well, this is so great because it helps me to be really professional when I'm talking to my client. And I asked the obvious question, which is, why don't you do this in your CRM? Because isn't that what CRM stands for, customer relationship management? And they all said, no, you can't do that in CRM. And that kicked off the value proposition of Capta today, which is keeping and growing your existing customers and bringing discipline and process to do that so that you have a more predictable revenue line around your existing clients, which make up in an average year 71% of your revenue, but in a year like 2024, more like 80% of your revenue. And so we went through a very similar process, and it's interesting to hear how that works, including, by the way, the issue of what do we do with the people who've already bought? So customers have already bought, we have contracts, we have commitments, we have personal relationships here. What do we do with them? And figuring out, do we sunset? Do we drag them along? Do we just like meet the very minimum commitment, but then not renew? Those were all really meaningful questions for us. That came up for you as well. How did you approach your existing customers?
Well, naively, I thought, well, we'll just keep them running for a year and then it'll all be fine. And the new revenues will just explode. And then we can just sunset those or sell it off or whatever. It doesn't matter. And of course, that's not what happens. You end up in a place where, every revenue stream represents, a third of your income. So, which way do you go? So I think in hindsight, what we should have done is kept the old business independent and set up a new brand and run that. But of course, it's very easy in hindsight to make those decisions. On the upside, we're now in a position where those old world customers are now being introduced to things like our core AI products or our relationship intelligence or revenue intelligence products. So we're able to effectively cross-sell now the new products to the old world customers, which was a kind of a vision that we thought we'd achieve, but we thought we'd get there a number of years ago rather than where we are now. So we certainly lots of challenges along the way. I think every company is slightly different. But I would encourage people to think about trying to be single purpose vehicles. Focus achieves greatness. And as soon as that focus is gone, it's very, very easy to be distracted, and it's very easy to not achieve. And so having that discipline to back a horse and then get 110% behind it is so important.
And that's when it gets scary too. That's when it gets scary because you have to make decisions, and like you said at the beginning, those decisions have consequences. And this is the job of the CEO is to make those calls and say, we're going to do this. We're not going to ski on 2 skis. We're going to pick one and we're going to go for it. And you hope you're right. And you hope you probably don't have all the data you need. And so you just have to go for it.
If we're right 70% of the time, it's a lot, right? And don't beat yourself up, right? It's the team that work with you or work for you, they need to know that you're confident. And it's okay to give them clarity and focus. And absolutely, the answer is black. This is what we're doing. It's black. I know it's black. This is the right thing to do. And it's absolutely okay to come back in a week later and say, guys, I've got access to additional information now. Apologies about that. It's actually white. And it's fine. This is the answer. It's white. We're going to go ahead and here's the plan. It's okay. What's not okay is middle of the road. Well, I'm not sure yet. So we should do a few bets on this and a few bets on all that does is generate instability within the team. And what people, it doesn't matter how unsure you are, you need to show yourself as a strong, focused, driven leader. And leaders give definitive answers.
Now, I want to pivot the conversation a little bit. A lot of the people who listen to this show, a lot of people that I meet because of my background are in B2B sales, or they're starting B2B companies and they have a sales motion, or they acquire B2B customers. If you were starting from scratch today and you were mentoring or talking to someone who's just beginning a company, what are the sales motions that are going to be most effective in 2024? So what I'm asking is the whole like predictable revenue SDR process, does that still work? Does spray and pray still work? Does everyone just need to turn on the spam machines? Do we all need communities? Do we all need research or ecosystem-led growth? What's the one thing that you would make a bet on if you were starting from scratch in B2B sales?
So first of all, if you think about what I said earlier, only 1 in 5 reps is hitting quota. If you can't win, if the founder can't do the selling, then you're not there yet. Then you're not ready for an outbound motion. As the founders, we can try and test lots of different things, but once we found a motion that works, is once we understand that we can that customers have got this particular problem and we can solve that particular problem and we can do it 10 times, now we're at the races. Okay. And so frankly, if you can't sell what you've got, you haven't got market fit, and you shouldn't be thinking about setting up a motion. And so priority number 1 is getting that product market fit. And if you can't sell it, or if you haven't got find one person that you can work closely with who is senior enough to kind of found this thing for you and work together. You have to get those early adopters. You have to work out what works and what doesn't, what lands for them, and then what value are we adding, and are they renewing, and so on. Now, assuming you've got all of that, assuming you've got product market fit, let's make that assumption. The motions that we're seeing that are working best in B2B sales is absolutely partner led. We're seeing the top performers we find have got more relationships in the market in general, not necessarily just in the sales process that they're running, but in general in their market. So the top performers are twice as likely to self-source their own opportunities, just because they go to events, they build their network, they're building relationships with individuals they may not be selling to for another 12 months. And so we know that relationships drive revenue in B2B sales. And so if you don't have those, so you have to figure out how are you going to go and get those relationships. And so your own internal team, you as the leader, can go out and build those relationships. You'll know that as well as being CEO of Ebsta, I'm also the CEO ambassador for Pavilion. Not quite sure how Sam got me into that, but I'm a huge fan of community, and what Sam's built at Pavilion is phenomenal. They've got 12,000 execs and above leaders of fast growth businesses coming together to effectively learn from each other. So it's all kind of iron sharpening iron stuff, and I'm a huge fan of community. And of course, by going along and investing the time and giving more than I receive, suddenly I've got a whole network of individuals that now understand what I do and will ask me for support. So there's Pavilion Slack channels, there's Pavilion in-person events and virtual events that I'm always going to, and I get a lot of value out of them myself. But actually what's interesting is the more you contribute, suddenly you find people asking you for input as well. So it works both ways. But for us, so relationships drive revenue. Build those relationships with the target audience that you're going after. It really matters. And knowing which personas at which businesses are the right businesses and personas to be targeting is the biggest gift you can have. If you know there's a definitive list of 1,000 companies you can go and sell to, and there's only 3 personas you ever need to talk to, there's only 3,000 people in the world you need to engage with, right? I mean, that's a huge gift. and working out who that market and that target audience is absolutely valid. And then the key question is, how are you going to build those relationships with those individuals? Or most importantly, who holds those relationships with those individuals? So from our perspective, we've seen a huge explosion in kind of growth consultancy or RevOps agencies. As the tech stack in the front office has got more and more complex, you've now got expert advisors in the market who are helping businesses to tie all this stuff together. And at the lowest level, and then at the top level, they're going in advising businesses that maybe are growing at 10, 12% a year and getting them to grow at 25, 30% a year. Now, these expert advisors have got the ear of the board, maybe the PE house that owns these businesses. And so for us, building a relationship with those personas, with those partners, it took a long time, but now we're absolutely part of their go-to-market motion. So these partners, from our perspective, those partners need our data points to understand where the weaknesses are within their customers. And so we now we give these growth consultants, these RevOps agencies, we give them tools where they can go in as part of their initial audit and effectively gather a whole load of information they couldn't gather before. Now, of course, what that means is that by default, they're putting Ebsta into their customers. Now, after a period of time, we'll either turn them off or their customers will become our customers. And we've seen that being an amazing route to market. The only word of caution I would say is it's very easy to spend a lot of time with partners that yields no results. So really getting clear on what a partner community looks like and how to activate them is absolutely key. And if you're this ancillary thing, you're talking to growth consultants. In our world, we're talking to growth consultants. But if you're just another widget and you're saying to some expert advisor that you want them to sell your widget for you, it'll never happen. They're too busy doing what they do best. But if you're an integral part of what they do best, then you just end up coming along with them. And so really trying to invest in that is what served us. And so if you think about, we've developed our own our 2024 benchmark report we did with Pavilion, and we analysed $54 billion worth of pipeline with Pavilion, 4.2 million opportunities, looking at all the signals that led to revenue. Now, that's an amazing partnership for us. Now, but the Pavilion community also got a lot of value out of it. So those types of relationships really do transform businesses, and I would encourage you to think about what relationships are going to drive your business forward.
That's really fantastic data there, and partner-led growth is essentially the term then that's working for you. This is what we want to be trying out. We want to see, how can I build an ecosystem that creates more champions, advocates, sales routes, networks, conversations, where I can be a really valuable part of this, so not on the side, but at the center of the ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. And we play in a very busy market, right? We're playing up against the likes of Gong and Clary and other big players that have got very deep pockets. So we have to come at it from a slightly different angle. We have to work with these partners much, much closer. We have to go much deeper into the insight so that we can actually transform the output that the customers are achieving, rather than just being this ancillary kind of point solution. So
yeah, great. Now, Guy, as we wrap up here, so we talked about the pivots at Ebsta. We talked about how this all came about. We talked about the philosophies that you bring to being a CEO and to being a leader. I'd love to ask, what are your personal practices, habits, routines that you use? Because we all know that being a founder and CEO is a stressful job, and you got to keep your head on straight as you're doing this. What do you lean on? Do you have books or practices or things that you like to share with others?
I'm not very balanced, unfortunately. I find it very difficult to switch off. So I think, but at the same time, I feel very blessed that I've got kind of a community of I have probably 5 or 6 individuals that I have a kind of co-mentoring relationship with. So I beat them up once a week or once a month, and they beat me up once a month, and there's a lot of care and a lot of love there, and I think I find that very helpful, because they you can have really difficult conversations with these individuals. So find your tribe, find people that you can lean into that perhaps are a year or two ahead of you or beyond, with it, that have actually experienced a lot of the challenges you're going through, because and whether that's through something like a Pavilion or through your own network, find those individuals that have been there, seen it, and done it, and can give you some support is really important. I think trying to live as healthy a lifestyle as you can. I'm not a naturally athletic individual, but I have a personal trainer, and I 3 times a week religiously go and spend time with them and do everything I can to distract him while I, try not to do the work. But actually having that kind of, whatever happens, I will make sure that happens at least 3 times a week. And then family, I think, what's really interesting about family is that you go through these waves with the family where it can be quite intense, as you have young children and so on. And I think what's really interesting is we have times in our business lives where things are going great, and family is almost, it's almost this distraction, this other thing that we don't want to have to focus on. But actually, when things are really tough, the family are the ones that you can lean into, and having that peace at home, having somewhere you can go that is a loving environment that's very stable, that that means that you're going to, while I might be the CEO, my wife is probably in charge more than I am, and make sure that I sleep well and eat well, and have time out to spend time with the children. I think there's a lot I wouldn't do if I wasn't kind of nudged in that direction. So and actually it has huge amounts of value and gives me the resilience I need to be able to go and tackle the challenges within the business. So nothing too kind of out there outrageous, but lean in. You can only do so much. Try not to beat yourself up too much. We all fail more than we win, right? And so just give yourself that opportunity, and remember that every day that you're an entrepreneur and you're running your own business, at least you're not someone else's employee, and that in itself is kind of what motivates me to keep going.
Fantastic! What a great way to end. Remember, at least you're not working for somebody else. Super. Well, hey, Guy Rubin, founder and CEO of Ebsta, thanks so much for joining us. We really loved the conversation. Appreciate you being on the Conscious Entrepreneur podcast.
Thanks for having me, Alex.